The first weekend of the Vegas Summer League is over. Who stood out? What were some of the top storylines? Leif and I are going to discuss. What's up? My name is Richard Stayman. You might know me better as MavsDraft. I do NBA Draft scouting reports and mock drafts and a bunch of other work through high school, college, EYBL, international, NBA, work on my Substack, MavsDraft.substack.com. I'm joined by Leif Thulin. He's been out for a week, but the man is back, the legend. He is a very smart college basketball mind. I remember when I first had him on as on the show before he came on full time. In 2021, he was a guest and he preached the gospel of Trey Murphy. Well, this is before the season started or maybe after one game, and he was like, "This guy's a first-round pick. He should be going in the lottery." Lo and behold, Leif knows ball. How are you doing, Leif?
I'm doing well. That was a kind introduction. I ended up in Vegas, so I missed two of the Salt Lake Summer Leagues. For those of you who don't know, I'm located in Salt Lake. And then the day I got back from Vegas is when the Summer League went to Vegas. So I've had to watch from afar other than one game, and I expected to watch about 4 or 5 in person. One day I went to 2 games, but I've caught up. My ESPN Plus binge watching has kept me up to date, and there's been a lot of standouts that have stood out. Like you look at the top 10 draft picks, top 11, I guess, and they stood out. And that's not always the case. Like, yeah, there's overreactions to Summer League. Sometimes it doesn't actually matter. Like sometimes Wembanyama was terrible in his first game, but he still did the most incredible thing. Like he blocked a shot from the free throw line that was a 3-pointer, and you're like, oh my gosh, like no one else can do that. And you look for those little tidbits. But in this case, multiple of those top 10, top 11 picks have stood out in a big way. And it's fun for us who've been evaluating these guys the whole time to see, oh yeah, we're right. But who knows? It's only been a game or two, but it's fun to like see the year's work of evaluation come into fruition and see them in the first time in the NBA scene.
Yep, I completely agree. I couldn't make it out to Summer League this year. I am wearing the Summer League shirt. If you're watching on YouTube, that's one of my favorite shirts I have. Just moved across the country to the East Coast, so unfortunately I couldn't make it this year, but hopefully next. But we're going to talk about some of these big names like Sheppard, Buzelis, Stephon Castle, the Mavs and Jazz game, and some other stuff as well. But first, just wanted to say thank you to everybody who continues to make Locked On NBA Big Board the first listen of your day. We really appreciate you. Leif and I appreciate you. James appreciates you. I mean, we all do here at the team, as well as Rafael, even though he's been out. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more as the playoffs wind down. The sports stop sporting like we want them to. But this summer, FanDuel is hooking up all customers with a boost or a bonus daily. That's right. There's something for you. There's something for everyone every day, all summer long. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. All right, let's talk about some of these top guys. Leif, we hinted at it, the top 11. There's a reason we said 11. And let's actually just start with him, Buzelis. I think he looked really good. They had a back-to-back, I believe, the Bulls. Yes, they did. They had a back-to-back against the Milwaukee Bucks and the Golden State Warriors. What did you think of Matas? Because I think personally he is a kind of guy who can shine in this exact environment. Like this is what he was made for, right? As these wings that can handle the ball and have the ball in their hands, they thrive. For those who don't know, Matas, he went pulling up the box score here, but he went 4 of 15 on his first game, got to the free throw line a ton, 7 rebounds, 2 assists, 2 blocks. He had 15 points. And then the game last night on Sunday, he had 28 points, 5 rebounds, 2 steals on 10 of 22 shooting, 4 of 8 from 3, got to the line still a decent amount. So Leif, that was a long-winded way to ask you. What did you think of Buzelis?
Yeah, he's a guy that, like you said, I think he's well suited to the environment of the Summer League where it's run and gun. Good athletes typically find a way to score well, even if it's inefficient. In his case, it was efficient in his good game. But you typically see athletes get out in transition, finish above the rim, get to the rim, force the issue. But what stood out to me is he's one of those guys, and it didn't necessarily surprise me because he's never been shy. Like he's always kind of had this belief of, oh, I can get to the basket, I can score, even though the numbers didn't like bear out nicely for his jump shot. He's never been a guy who's shied away from taking it. Even in like it was pro basketball. The G League we kind of scoffed at this past year with a bad defense. It was unorganized, but it's still professional basketball for a guy who's young. And he was ready in terms of the mentality of the NBA. Like, I'm going to be a good player. He talked about how he wanted to play Reece Shane one-on-one. And I know some of that's just publicity, but it's confidence. And so the summer league, I think, makes sense for him. On a more basketball specific note, as opposed to mentality, I was impressed with the way he stayed composed when going to the basket, because he is still slender of build, even though he's gotten stronger. He looks far different from the first time you and I saw him in person, where he was extremely thin and lanky. He filled out a bunch in the year in between, but I liked the composure at the rim. A couple times played off 2 feet. A couple times, like the highlight's going to be when he had a poster. But I liked the actual, I would say, solidified basketball game. Like, you didn't only see the flashes, you saw him play smart basketball and using those athletic traits to his advantage, not just for highlight plays, but for his advantage more frequently. He got a few layups where he played off 2 feet. He drew fouls, like you said, at a really high clip, made a few nice passes. But the shot to me is still not all that impressive. Like, it just looks a little janky to me. But the fact he was able to have that be a known commodity, not a great shooter, and still able to force the issue as a plus size ball handler, it leaves me pretty happy, actually. And I'd be pretty excited if I'm a Bulls fan that type of player with that much ability, maybe not production in the immediate term, but that much ability fell to me at 11.
Yeah, and the Bulls haven't had a lot of upside to be optimistic about over the last couple of years since Lonzo got hurt. Like, they really haven't, like, just being completely blunt, since that Lonzo injury, and where they were really starting hot in the 20. I'm blanking on the seasons, but whenever I think it was 21, 22, or maybe
21,
22.
22.
Yeah. That year they had a lot of hope and they were really good. And since then, it just feels like there's been no vision, no light at the end of the tunnel. And now you have something where it's like, hey, we got a young player at least that can do a lot. Now, the off the dribble shooting is still concerning to me. I haven't seen much there. I think the catch and shoot is going to be fine. It's the off the dribble stuff. And for a guy who has the ball in his hands a lot, that's kind of something where, I don't know, I feel like there's stuff to work with there, but also a lot of stuff that needs work. What did you think of his defense?
I think he used his length well. Like, he was able to impact the basketball game in a tangible fashion with, I'm going to get a rebound, I'm going to deflect a pass, or at least contest shots. I do think he's a little too upright. We saw him do the agility drill, and I thought he looked pretty good. So it's not necessarily a can he do it. I think it's about doing it on a more consistent basis. But I'll admit, I think I was more focused on his offense than his holistic defensive game, because that's what mattered for a guy who scored as many as he did in these games. It's like, how is he doing it? Is it efficient? Is it something that's reproducible? So the defense I didn't pay attention to. So there was to a point where it wasn't glaring. I would have noticed if it was glaring. So it to me, I think he just uses his length adequately, but I don't think he uses his 38.5-inch vertical and 6'11" frame to be a true, really good defender.
Yeah, he's a good help side blocker. It's the same thing as it was in the G League, where, and also in the G League, in Summer League, like, you can only take so much away from this stuff, man. Like, nobody is out here putting in 10,000. Like, you're not getting the same intensity even as a regular game season on the defensive end. I'm not reading a ton into it. He wasn't bad. That's enough for me. But he's interesting. I think let's just wrap up the segment with this. If you had to make any changes to your evaluation, which I'm not a fan of from Summer League, but if you had to make any changes from what you saw in your evaluation from May, when we saw him in the combine, to now, what would those changes be?
I would say I overthought I typically believe that the G League, even though there's inefficiency, those type of players will end up playing well in the NBA because they've been against better players. They have the confidence, and that's what I've been impressed with Buzelis. So I ended up with Buzelis around 10 on my board, and I think he was a victim for me of just overthinking and over focusing on a bad jump shot, because I knew the percentages weren't good, but seeing it in person scared me more than other players who are inept shooters coming into this draft, which was kind of the storyline. Like, a lot of these wings had good traits athletically and poor shooting. And he's the one I punished the most for it. Just because I thought, like, wow, that's really not a pretty jump shot. But he's 6'11", has the ball. So I think what I would do is trust the film I watched before as opposed to the combine. I don't think it's necessarily a basketball thing. I think I overthought the actual seeing of a shot. And I think in a couple of the cases, it's actually helped me in evaluations. Like Stephon Castle, I had him number 5 by the time it was the combine, but like my 1 through 5 was kind of jumbled. And I ended up with him at number 1, and he's been excellent so far. So if you're taking the buyer's remorse versus like, oh, the buyer's success type of thing, I think it's a split bag. But I would say Buzelis and Sheppard are the two I overthought the most. I moved the most throughout the entire process. And so far, I would say they've really exceeded expectations of everyone, but especially myself, because I dropped them kind of later in the process as opposed to early in the process.
Yeah, completely agree with all that. I echo that completely. I think I overthought his jumper. I was lower on Buzelis than you. I didn't account for that. The fact that I liked his shot for 9 of the 12 months I evaluated him, really like probably 12 of the 15. But I should have kept some stock in the catch and shoot because I think I overdid it with the off the dribble. I still don't buy it that much, but I was probably too low, and like I'm still confident in the overall big picture of my evaluation on him, where he's going to be fine, but I don't see that star upside. So I don't really want to make any changes from 2 games of summer league, and also like I can admit, okay, maybe I overthought this one element of how it would scale to an NBA environment. Like that's pretty much, I feel like at this point, all you can do is just kind of say, okay, maybe it's different than I once thought. But let's talk about some of those guys you mentioned: Reed Sheppard, Stephon Castle, Cody Williams, a few of the others. But first, let's talk about FanDuel real fast. I love sports. I love them so much. I never want them to stop. But as the playoffs wind down, we get fewer games, and the sports aren't sportsing like I want them to. But FanDuel lets me keep the sports going whenever I want. All I have to do is open the app and dream up bets anytime I'm in the mood. And this summer, FanDuel is hooking up all customers with a booster bonus daily. That's right. There's something for everyone every day, all summer long. So head over to FanDuel.com and start making the most of your summer. FanDuel is the official sporting bet partner of Major League Baseball. Leif, are you watching Fox Sports or ESPN on your TV all day and you feel like you have to turn that volume down all the time without shouting? Well, if you're like Leif, and I know he is, make the switch to Locked On Sports Today, a free 24/7 streaming channel program for you every day to bring you the biggest stories without all the screaming. Locked On Sports Today brings you can't miss analysis, opinions, and news, streaming 24/7 on the YouTube or the free Amazon Fire TV channels app, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. All right, segment 2. I know I just said the YouTube, not proud of that one, but let's talk about some of these guys that you talked about in the last segment. Let's start off with your number 1 player, Stephon Castle. What did you think of everything you saw from him in the summer league? And I believe he's out now for the remainder of summer league, right? Like he doesn't really have much to play for anyways. What did you think of him in San Antonio?
Well, yeah, let me backtrack and give a little kind of what I anticipated coming into summer league versus how it's differed, if at all, because I think that's a different analysis than just like watching the game. So my expectation of him while he was at UConn was he was going to play 2 guard because Tristan Newton's an All-American point guard. And the question was, how quickly could he adapt to being a point guard? And that's why I believed he had more upside that was untapped as opposed to athletic upside. Like there's a rawness that to a lot of people that you believe have upside. Like we talked about Ron Holland for much of the process as having one of the higher potentials that was largely reliant on his jump shot improving and him tapping into those athletic skills, I should say. Well, if you ask me, Castle showed a lot of the basketball side. He just hasn't shown the positional side where the value goes up if you're playing the point guard. And so I talked with one of my friends and we talked about versatility. Like he shined as a 2 guard. And then towards the end of the year, he played a little more on ball. He played a little more operator as a point guard. He also played off the ball in the kind of the Andre Jackson role that was coined for Andre Jackson as a non-shooter and was able to thrive near the basket and score without the ball on a team that had a bunch of great players that won a national championship easily. And why I say all of this is I expected him to play good basketball because he's shown he could do that in any type of setting. He's played the 2 guard. He's played off, like very much off the ball because they had other guards that are in the NBA like Cam Spencer. They had a shooter like Caravan who probably would have been a top 40 pick. They had a top 7 pick in Klingon and an All-American guard. So he was 5th on the totem pole coming off a knee injury, and he figured out how to be an impactful player to the point where you're like, oh, you can't ignore this anymore. I understand everyone knows that, but I want to say that's not the evaluation what you're getting. What you're evaluating for the NBA is the point guard position, and that's what the guesswork is. What nuances do you pick up on and see this guy's a really good passer in these situations. He uses his body well to get to the rim. He finishes well. His shot looks better. So you go to the combine and you see his shot look a little bit better, and you have to make it like have an imprint on your mind, because everyone can shoot a basketball if they're going to the NBA in an open setting, but not everyone makes that drastic of a jump when doing a tryout for their professional career. And so I saw him as a guy who had a really high floor all along, and I convinced myself from April onwards how high his ceiling would be. So now we go to the summer league, and you see him just look unbelievably comfortable playing his first professional minutes as a point guard, a position he hasn't played since high school. And he's creating, he steps into threes confidently, he rebounds the ball, defends, all the things you knew he was going to do. He did well. And then the things that were slightly guesswork, he did very well as well. He came off pick and rolls, involved others. He knocked down shots off the dribble and off the catch. So that's a long-winded way of saying the analysis for him was different than a lot of other prospects, and why I became so optimistic for his prospects of having success to the point I put him number one on my board was he had the versatility to succeed in many capacities. And if you put him in the right capacity, I think his ceiling's higher than just about anyone in a class that I think is devoid of top end talent. So
yeah,
I'm excited about him.
One of my biggest, not regrets, but one of the things I find myself doing this all the time is where I'll watch for the first time. I'll watch someone. Last year, my number one player was Stephon Castle at this point. I was very high on him, or I had Holland one, and then I had Castle two. But I was alternating where I was like, at least Castle's the best guard in this class, because I did a massive, you can find this on my site. If you just type into Google MavsDraft Stephon Castle, I did a play-by-play breakdown of his game. And honestly, it was one of my proudest works. And I was like, this is why this guy is going to be a top 5 pick. Then a year later, this is the problem of overthinking that I do all the time, is I talk to myself out of it. And I'm like, do I trust the jumper though? And kind of like the last thing with Matas Buzelis, I probably overthought the shooting. And I regret it because I think, one, the fit is perfect. I mean, you can't draw up a better fit for someone like him. And two, like, okay, even if he doesn't shoot, he's good enough to make up for it everywhere else. Like, he was still very good, even though he didn't shoot efficiently, 37%, 20 of 54 in the 3 games he played in Summer League before the wrist injury. Shot really well at the rim. He took more off the dribble jumpers than he did shots at the rim. And to me, he's not going to be doing that in the NBA. So this 37% is absolute, not whatever the opposite of fool's gold is, but it's just a misconception, right? Like, it's not real. Like, he's not going to be that inefficient because he is not going to be taking off the dribble jumpers. And let's just look what happens if he took those off the dribble jumpers. He went 5 of 20 overall. So that makes his field goal percentage out of that 15 of 34, which is just under 50%. That's a massive increase. I'm big on Stephon Castle. I never should have rode off that wave. I still had him top 10, but I think I just overthought him a little. That's one person where I'm like, you put him on the team. This is even before Summer League. The day the draft happened, that Wednesday night, I was like, yep, that's one I should have changed my board. And knowing that it was a possibility.
You knew he was going to go 4. The way the board started to fall,
we knew. Yeah,
we knew, and it made me extremely confident I was going to be right. And in this draft, I think there was very little confidence about being right about most players. And I felt very confident that even if he's not like a superstar, there's a real chance of being an all-star because he's the point guard for Victor Wembanyama.
Yep. The same way Mo Williams was the all-star being the point guard for LeBron James. Like,
exactly. And I think Castle is going to be a better player than Mo Williams, and Mo Williams is a good player. He made an all-star game. And obviously the NBA's changed and stuff. But one more point about Castle. Like, this is gonna be out there. And this is not necessarily my own thought. My friend posited this first, but I think it's really insightful. Like, if you look at the players who've overachieved that haven't been like clear cut, like Wembanyama aside, the players that have overachieved and been lottery picks but have become all-stars that you may not have thought of, like Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, for instance. He came in as a 2 guard who was defensively oriented. I think that's fair to say with the Clippers. He had skills, he had a bag, but he didn't get to demonstrate it because he had people in front of him. Well, I think Castle was that way when he came to UConn. And so he's a little ahead of that development curve. And he may not get to where Shai is, But Shea's a plus-size point guard, is a good defender who developed into a 30-point scorer with what I'd consider unconventional offensive skills. Like, yes, he's a 90% free throw shooter and a solid three-point shooter, but I still wouldn't consider him a shooter, if that makes sense. Like, I know it sounds weird, but he does it off guile and craftiness and really good quickness.
Yeah.
Castle's going to do it off of strength and pick and roll navigation, playing off of Wembanyama's gravity. But I think he's going to be a 20-point per game scorer that's able to be one of the better defenders at his position in the NBA and get you 6-7 assists. And that's a really, really good player. Like, that's of the ilk of former All-Stars or current All-Stars. So I'm very optimistic in that regard. And I'm very curious to see what happens in the start of that season of how he and Wembanyama, how much of a jump they can take. Obviously, he's going to be playing next to Chris Paul. Well, who developed Shai Gilgeous-Alexander quite well? Chris Paul. And I'm not saying they're 1-to-1, but there's more of a similarity there than some of the other players that Castle's been likened to. Like Josh Hart and Castle are nothing alike, if you ask me.
Yeah, I do not disagree. I think it's also a really good point about having Chris Paul there to develop him. That's actually something I didn't even think of. Well, let's talk about Reed Sheppard in the Jazz and Mavs, Cody Williams coming up. But first, let me tell you about eBay Motors. Passion, drive, and patience. That's the formula for winning championships, and it's also what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motor has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance: superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and more. Whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has you covered. With over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, you'll always find exactly what you're looking for. And with eBay Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time or your money back. Because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash. With all the parts you need at all the prices you want, it's easy to make your car, the MVP and bring home huge wins. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. eBay Guaranteed Fit, only available to U.S. customers. All right, last segment here. Let's talk about Reed Sheppard, the Utah Jazz, Cody Williams, and the Dallas Mavericks, because I am MavsDraft. I had to slip that in there. We'll skip the Magic this time. For those who know me, I'm Mavs Magic Draft too, but we're going to talk about the Magic, I think, in an upcoming episode. Let's talk about Reed Sheppard staying in the state of Texas. We just talked about Stephon Castle. Reed Sheppard was about as consistent as you can draw up. First game, he had 23 points on 9 of 17 shooting. Second game, he had 22 points on 9 of 15 shooting. That was with 7 assists in the second game, 5 in the first game. He had 6 combined steals and 4 combined blocks in 2 games. The brand continues to thrive for him, right? So I liked what I saw from him. I think so far he has actually been the best rookie in Summer League. I mean, are we shocked? Like, this guy was an efficiency king in a low usage role. Are we shocked he's doing it again in Houston?
I ended up overthinking him a lot and moving him down. And I don't think it's a given he's going to be great in the NBA because of the Summer League either. My logic was,
agreed, a
lot of these places that you could have landed in the NBA don't really fit what he does well. What he does well is he shoots the heck out of the ball. That's a given. And everyone says he's a good defender, but I don't see it as an on-ball defender. And so if you're going to play a 2-guard, then that hurts. So now if you're a point guard, which a lot of people project him to be, and so far in the Summer League he looks the part, there aren't very many landing spots in the top 10, if you revisit it, that would give him conducive role to show that point guard ability. So that was kind of my logic for dropping him. And then the second part of that would be, I felt like the defense was propping him up versus Dillingham, whereas Dillingham was the creator. And you kind of had to use them as foils because when you evaluate them, they're both on the court at the same time. And the one that popped to me is Dillingham, despite Sheppard being the more consistent, more efficient player. Dillingham's the one that I think has the more unique traits. But as for Sheppard in the Summer League, they've opened the court up. They've given him the ball. They've let him come off ball screens and show off his shooting. How easily will that be able to translate to the NBA? I'm not so sure, especially on a team with the Rockets where they have Fred VanVleet, where they have a point guard in Thompson, who, he's best suited as being a point guard because he doesn't shoot well. So how do they complement each other? One's really good on defense and one's a really good shooter. That makes sense, but both would be better suited being the point guard. They obviously have Jalen Green and Şengün as players they need to feed the ball in. So I have kind of concerns in that regard, but he clearly fits the billing. Like, he's shooting the heck out of the ball and he looks like the most comfortable rookie in Summer League, he and Stephon Castle, in my opinion. And I will say that I think Sometimes you just got to watch the basketball in Kentucky and say, well, he's a really good basketball player, which I thought all along the season, and not think about the NBA fit, because if you're a good basketball player, you're a really good basketball player. And so I think this is one I'll end up being wrong on, because because Sheppard is just that efficient and knows how to play the game at a good enough level that he'll figure it out.
Yeah, I respect that. I think for me, this each just looked like the exact same player. Like it's again different when you're playing against guys who are fighting for their lives to be in the NBA versus the guys who are solidly there, making the millions and have the long-term contracts and have the security and have the experience. So we'll see, but I don't think there's any reason to suggest that some of the shot blocking and the hands and all the defensive production is going to just fall off a cliff. Like, it may not be 1-to-1, but it's going to be damn close. And it's also the same thing with the jumper. I don't think it's going to be 52%, but he's going to be in the 40s for a long, long time. And I think that's an NBA player right there. And the playmaking has already looked better. Kentucky guards, like you said, Rob Dillingham pops a little bit more, but yeah, so that's Reed Sheppard. Let's talk about the Mavs Jazz game really quickly. I'm doing this mostly because Leif, like, if you're either one of two things, unable to see the screen because your YouTube app has crashed, or you are listening on the podcast, Leif is wearing a Utah Jazz hat. I am MavsDraft. So naturally, the Jazz and Mavs honored us both as the Locked On Bowl by playing each other in the first game of Summer League for them. It was a really disgusting game for most of the Mavs. Omax Prosper went 2 of 11. Melvin Ajinca went 5 of 13. I think he was the best looking prospect on the team outside of. There are times Emmanuel Miller looked really good. And if you've listened to the show, you know I love Emmanuel Miller, being from Dallas and watching TCU for the last 7 years, really 6 years on. Obviously, E-Man wasn't there the whole time, but he has been there for the last few, and I've been a big proponent of his game. He did a lot of the same stuff: 8 points, 3 rebounds, 3 assists, 1 steal, only 1 foul, and that was in 17 and a half minutes. This episode will drop shortly before the game tonight against Memphis for Dallas, so I'm hoping to see him get more minutes. And with Utah, Isaiah Collier had 7 assists, 12 points on 5 of 13 shooting. Kyle Filipowski went 10 points, 6 rebounds, 2 assists on 5 of 10. Cody Williams was the star of this game, 21 points on 9 of 15, 3 rebounds, 4 assists, only 2 turnovers. And then there was just some other guys sprinkled in there too. But I don't know if you got a chance to watch this super in depth, but what did you think of the Jazz side? And then I'll kind of touch on the Mavs side.
Yeah, I didn't think anyone in the Mavs really stood out. I thought Ajinca was probably the best prospect, actually by a wide margin, for the Mavs on that one. But Cody Williams, you'll find this funny, because after we recorded one of the last days, I said, if Cody Williams doesn't go 6, because I was thinking to myself, he's got to go 6. The Hornets are going to take him. He's got to go to my Jazz. And I was giving this whole rant to Richard and James, and they took it well, but it was one of those fun moments off the screen. So then I texted them, I told you so, once it got to 8 or 9, I was like, it's got to be my guy. And then I did get scared, because last time I thought we were for sure taking Jaden McDaniels and took Udoka as a Buki. So that goes one of two ways. But this time I ended up getting the pick I wanted, and so that means I put extra expectation. I go to the Summer League in Salt Lake City, and he kind of is quiet and blends in. It made sense. He's not necessarily the most assertive, but then he plays this game that you referenced against the Mavericks, 21 points, a poster dunk with his left hand, all that stuff. That's loud. But what I loved the most is that his 21 points were quiet. They were efficient. They were within the flow of what the Jazz were trying to do. And I know it's like a kind of a glorified pickup game at times in Summer League when it's just run and gun. It's ugly. But everything he did was in control. There was no turnover out of hilarious, comedic, terrible dribbling. No runouts that were just cheapies. Like, what he did is he made smart basketball plays, shot open shots, got to the rim, made the right passes, was solid on defense. He didn't rebound as many as maybe you'd hope for that frame, but I think the thing that excites me the most about Cody Williams, and you'll see some bias coming out here, but for the record, I was talking about Cody Williams as being a top 5 guy most of the year, and I ended up with him at 5, and I honestly think I should be higher on him. But the reason that I'm excited is his one thing that he needs to improve the most is strength. That's the easiest thing to improve in the NBA. Like, you look at these athletes and you say, well, if you're an athlete, you can probably learn to shoot, or if you're a really good shooter, you can become more athletic. Those are not as easy as getting stronger. What happens when he gets stronger? He's going to become a better defender. I already think he's a pretty good NBA defender because he's got that positional length. He'll be playing the 2 guard at 6'8". He's not a great rebounder. How do you improve that? Strength. How do you improve what's already a strength, in my opinion, in finishing? He's figured out how to be a guile finisher using finesse. Well, if he gets stronger, now he can use that physique and that length to get to the rim and not be reliant on guile and craftiness. He can use strength as well. It makes you a better passer because you can ward off defenders. You can go to the rim more explosively, create better, and he sees the floor well. So that's why I'm so excited. He doesn't have glaring weaknesses, and his strengths are already clear-cut, but they can get further strengthened by him getting stronger. His weaknesses are not bad already, but they are glaring how thin he is. And if he adds muscle, I think those weaknesses really diminish in how much they matter. So I'm very excited about Cody Williams. And the fact that it was a quiet 21 makes me happier than if it were a loud 21.
Yeah, I was pretty impressed with Cody. I thought he would get gift wrapped a lot of different shot opportunities, but that wasn't the case. Like, it was the same looks he's going to get in the NBA, and he shot pretty well, both from the field. I mean, 40% doesn't sound like a ton, but like some of the jumpers just weren't falling. I think that's still a concern for him. But you look at the rim finishing, and like you said, like adding strength is very easy. Anybody can do that. And I think especially like in the NBA, that's a very simple thing to do. He's going to be a really good finisher at the rim. And if he can do that, that's going to keep him in the league for a long time, because at his size, and if he can create his own, if he can put pressure on the rim, and create his own shot off the dribble, like that's going to go a very long way, even if the 3-point ball doesn't fall. Like, you nailed that analysis, I think. I just feel like he had a really good game, though. I mean, I was just impressed by what he did in that one. They obviously have played in the Salt Lake Summer League, and he struggled. He had a game 0 of 8 against the Sixers in a game really where a lot of people were struggling, I think, because I think that was the game against with Jared McCain's 2 of 11 or 1 of 9. That's what it was. It was the 1 of 9. So there were some other struggles in that. Like, it's hard to read too much into that. And I'm a believer of, like, you have to read the context of the game. Like, one of my prime examples is Cade Cunningham's worst game. Everybody picked him apart, but the next best player who shot more than 5 shots didn't even shoot over 50%. So you have to look at the context of the game sometimes. I did like what I saw from Cody, but I think he's definitely somebody that will be helping himself in Vegas. And Utah actually plays tonight too. They're the second to last game starting. They're playing against Sacramento. So watch for them. But this has been Locked On NBA Big Board. Again, for Leif and myself, Richard, we really appreciate it. We're going to be back tomorrow talking about some of the other guys we missed today that we couldn't talk to, recapping some of the games happening Monday night as well. We really appreciate it. Again, thanks for making us your first listen, and we will be back tomorrow.